Welcome to African Tourism Tides with Africa's videocast, where we explore how data, technology, and collaboration are transforming tourism and development across the African continent. Today, we have with us Professor Vukosi Marivate, who is an ABSA Chair of Data Science and full Professor of Computer Science at the University of Pretoria. He leads the African Institute for Data Science and Artificial Intelligence, co-founded Lilapa AI and Deep Learning Indaba, and has been instrumental in building data and AI ecosystems across African contexts. Vukosi, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, and I look forward to the conversation.
Great. So to get started, so your work has been central to AI landscape, as we've seen in different projects that you have founded and that you are carrying out. Could you share with us what first motivated you to focus your research and leadership on those African data challenges, and why does this matter for the continent on the longer run?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think on one side, it goes back to why I ended up in data science in the first place. So I now, over a decade ago, while I was working on my PhD in machine learning or artificial intelligence, I was working in reinforcement learning. And one of the challenges that became very clear is to really get practical work to be done, meaning that when you get a very good kind of fundamental result in machine learning, it's always connected with the data. Where is this data coming from? And as such, you could see all of these use cases in lots of spaces where really either are problems that look like toy problems, or we were continued reusing data that came outside the continent. So to really do work in machine learning, in AI, you really have to think about the data science bits, which is you think about the full pipeline of how you're going to acquire data, how you're going to bring it together, do modeling, and then finally solve the challenge. So with this, then it meant learning lots of new ways to engage in research. And through that, it's then understanding the state that Africa, Latin America, Asia might be in different places where data might not be as easily available, but you still want to come up with innovations that then help ultimately change the lives of people.
Yeah, and that actually has been quite the case when you think about tourism specifically. It's a common idea that there's this data gap, not only when you think about the African context, but as a whole. Then you see examples like limited visitor insights or fragmented statistics. From your perspective, what are the main barriers preventing like these data ecosystems from being stronger, and how might we begin to close those gaps?
Yeah, so one of the challenges with data is that data also is connected on one side with control. So if you make data available, people feel that they're losing control of either a view of ways of people to interact with an ecosystem. So if you're thinking about tourism, I'm not a tourism expert, but I am guessing you're going to have the intersection of government entities, you're going to have tourism operators, you're going to have cities, you're going to have even the tourists themselves. So now, if you are in charge of that, enabling that ecosystem, feeling that you can either understand, even if it's like tourism numbers, and then you can show like a national number, a provincial number, but then once you go in and you say, oh, we have to show really more regional information, it might mean that other people that have this information and we don't keep that information. So that asymmetry is something that is hard to let go of. And that's like one of the reasons why you might not have the data being easily available. Another one is just the governance. Who collects data for who, and how do they actually then interchange that data? So it might just be, for example, how we connected with the Nova SBE, for example, is thinking about you might have mobile use data, right? They might give you some proxy of how many people are in an area at a specific time. If enough of this data also provides that it's people coming into a country or a region who are from typically outside. Those people might be tourists, whether it's for personal reasons or business. Now, what is the data governance that will actually then really oversee that relationship, that if I am in charge of tourism in that country, I would like to engage with mobile telephony providers and saying, can you give me this type of information, even if it's at a population level? Is there governance that that information that was collected from subscribers on the mobile network, is there governance to make sure that it's not misused? On the same time, when the government gets access to that information, what are their rights and responsibilities? How can they share it with other people in these areas? So that governance piece is also a challenge, that if the governance is not clear, that the people who are dealing with the data don't know how they can share or not share, or if they are sharing, what the data agreements have to look like, people then end up being fearful of sharing anything. And that's why then you have further data not being available. The last piece, I think, is just going to be the skills. Do people have the skills to really process the data, show use cases, and then from there unlock new insights that are then useful for the tourism sector and beyond, right? We are not thinking, sometimes we think very limited to just say, oh, this is useful for tourism, but it could be useful for other parts of the economy, or even just knowing our society.
Yeah, and now you actually started touching a topic that I wanted to address, which is like how communities and different types of stakeholders can co-design AI and data solutions. And I just wanted to know, in your perspective and in your experience, are there any other examples of that approach applied to tourism? Or any other similar approaches that could actually help the sector? You mentioned, for example, using telco data to provide insights for governments, for companies, but are there any other examples that you can think of?
Yeah. So one could be just, again, continuing in the theme of data that might be one place but used in another one. For example, if you had ridership information about a public transport system, right? You could again understand what's happening locally, who are the people who use the system a lot, who regularly, versus the people who come in for a few days or a few weeks in between. And that information, just that simple information of, in the last month, here's people who are typically always around there, and then here's people who are new in the system and only had 2, 3, 4 rides. And this could give you an indication of the transportation system. The other one could be, how, not just the ridership, but then where are people actually going, right, within a city, right? If you have an event, these are how many people show up who are new inside the system. Here's where they were going, and this coincides with event X, Y, or Z. Again, we are not here for concentrating on the individual rider, but when at the population level, what is actually going on? How then does this information engage with other parts of a city? I use a city because it's just where lots of things kind of happen and they interact with each other. This could then be with, how are businesses using this information to better plan for the future? If we know that it seems every November, there are these 4 main events that happen in our city. And we've seen in the past that these are the type of patterns we've been seeing. How then do we plan for this year's event? How do we provide a better experience that could then lead to better economic value that stays within that city? So these are things where now, if you go to a city's public transport system and say, hey, could you then make available in an open manner maybe your ridership information per month, but with these types of like categories, this would be very important for us then, for somebody else to pull from that data and use for another piece of a puzzle of innovation. And this could then enhance tourism, right, in many different ways.
And now changing the direction of the conversation a little bit, your research also highlights the importance of local languages and inclusive technologies. Why should we pay more attention to them? And in the context of building data systems, ecosystems.
Yeah. This one I use a recent example, even though it's a year old. Last year, I got the opportunity for the first time to visit Dakar, Senegal. And if
Mm-hmm.
you engage with a lot of information online about Senegal, the view that you will probably have is almost like, oh, everybody in Senegal speaks French, mostly French.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you get to Dakar and you start engaging, you start noticing that most people are engaging in Wolof. So now just think about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you're designing systems, and in this case, as I said, it might be thinking about, oh, in tourism, who is being catered for, who are potentially the places that might be growth. How do you get people to experience your country? If you had
Mm-hmm.
more visibility of Wolof online and really providing the voice of the average Senegalese or the average Dakar resident, it might be like a much more dense kind of experience
Mm-hmm.
that tourists actually have when they visit Dakar. Because you might then say, oh, before I go there, maybe let me learn a few phrases in Wolof. Let me
Mm-hmm.
understand, where might there be areas that are more inaccessible if you only speak French, but become more accessible if you engage in Wolof as well. And then also maybe the locals will provide other information that you wouldn't have known in these
Mm-hmm.
cases. So
Mm-hmm.
when you build systems that allow that interactivity in multiple languages and
Mm-hmm.
not just dominating languages, I think ideas and information pass through in these areas. I remember first time, like, going
Mm-hmm.
to China and being able to engage inside a taxi and through the
Mm-hmm.
DE app or the app of the, like, the local ride hailing, being able to write something in one language and then on the other side, the driver get it in their language that is preferred because there's an automated translation systems. It really made getting around Tianjin for me much, much easier. I could move around and
Mm-hmm.
feel very comfortable, even though I was in a foreign country.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's great that throughout our conversation, you have highlighted very different examples, but super relevant and interesting ones of how destinations can be marketed or managed or even experienced, right? As you were saying right now for about your experience in Dakar. But to also get to know a little bit more about the creation of communities around data, around AI, and of course, you being the co-founder of Deep Learning Indaba, what role does this community specifically, or even data communities in general, can play, and how can they interact with academia as well? Also considering that you are a professor at the University of Pretoria, and here, of course, we're at Nova. But just to understand how you think those sectors can work together, be more connected, and what could be the potential impact of that.
Yeah, I think on one is understanding what tooling is available to each other. So on
Mm-hmm.
one side, if I think about if we stick to the example of the car, so just imagine now, then you have a tourism company or a city or a country deciding to say, okay, now what we're going to do is make sure we become as multilingual as possible to better
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
represent our region, that our region is
Mm-hmm.
not also that tourism also doesn't mean people who are coming in from outside the country. It is also people locally
Mm-hmm.
moving and experiencing their
Of
country.
course.
So we're making sure we the way that we communicate takes care of them. Now,
Mm-hmm.
that resource that you provide, whether it's like, oh, we translate our material into, 5, 6 languages, making sure that that language, that material also gets archived in a way that is reusable for AI researchers
Mm-hmm.
is great, right? And
Mm-hmm.
with the correct kind of licensing that better represents what your expectations are. So you might say, we're making this available because now for the tourism industry, you might not have a lot of written or spoken content that is in Wolof.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Continuing. And as such, we make this available. And here's the English equivalent. Here's the Portuguese equivalent. Here's, like, another. That is the same. It's available. But then now for me, I'll go like, oh, now I can probably build better tools for the tourism sector,
Mm-hmm.
not just in Senegal, but likely other regions, because I have this information that is very hard to come by in these spaces. For people like myself, we are always extending and building new models for language. And we would like then to say, are people testing these? Are people trying to use this and getting,
Mm-hmm.
for them to, like, to be available for them? So, for example, as you've highlighted, I'm one of the co-founders of Lelapa AI, and Lelapa AI, we're building a lot of speech recognition tools that really
Mm-hmm.
are suited to get into a lot of client service areas. So you
Mm-hmm.
can imagine having a call center that is connected to tourism, being able to then allow the callers and the agents to speak in local languages, and through that really resolve the queries that the person might have and provide them with information. And then all the while being able to have a rich kind of analytics that are provided to the organization that is
Mm-hmm.
taking on those, because now we can process them speaking in whatever African language that they're
Mm-hmm.
interested in
Mm-hmm.
hosting, right? That again provides an extra layer of information, that the reason we might tell people that, oh, please engage in Portuguese, French, or English is because those are high resource languages that will then be
Mm-hmm.
taken, that they have all
Mm-hmm.
of these AI tools that are available to them to transcribe. Just like when we're speaking here on your side, you're recording the podcast, but then it's also creating an English transcription.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's super cool and really inspiring. And thank you so much, Vukosi, for everything that you've shared. I'm hoping that our audience was as inspired as I was with all the different solutions and approaches that we can have, and like leveraging the power of communities and all. We are gonna wrap up for today. Thank you so much for being here. I hope to see you soon, and also hope to see our audience together with us for the next episodes. Thank you very much, Vukosi.
All right. No, thanks so much. And yeah, you have a good day. And yes, one day I'll come back into Lisbon and come visit the Nova once again. So
Yes,
thank you.
of course. We are waiting for you.
Okay, thank you.